questions? How is that? 40? 45?
Thanks, Adrian. Now we're going to put you on the couch.
Yeah, that's all right. Is it a chaise? I want to get a chaise for my office, but Waste won't spring for that.
I thought about bringing one in and just flying you on there and asking you these questions. So I do have a couple of questions from the floor, so thanks for those people that put themselves out there. Burnout, does it exist?
I saw that written on the piece of paper. Yeah, it does. We actually, so at Waste we do a mental health screen with all our athletes twice a year. It consists of a DAS, which is a depression, anxiety, stress scale, and it consists of an athlete burnout questionnaire. So we screen for it. Burnout from a conceptual point of view, certainly one says you're exhausted physically, you lose what's called devaluation of the sport experience. So essentially this thing that is I'm engaged in, the sport, is no longer as important to me as it once was. Maybe I'm studying and that's becoming more interesting. Maybe I'm more interested in partying on a Friday and Saturday night with my friends. There's other things that are becoming more interesting for me. And the other one is a reduced sense of accomplishment, which is to say that I don't feel like I'm getting as much back. Maybe it's not as simple as I'm not winning. I was winning and now I'm not winning. It might just be I don't feel like I'm progressing at all. So I'm not achieving what I was. And if you get all those three together, and the exhaustion bit has to be fairly significant, then we start to look at what is a case of burnout. But it's not really clearly, there's not a here is burnout and here is not burnout. We often see with our athletes that they'll be slightly elevated on the exhaustion scale, and we don't worry about that. Good, you're training hard, keep going, unless they've got something happening on the other two. Okay. If we see all three together, then we know we've got something more significant. But, yeah. Do you want to?
Do you think it's exacerbated because of the demand for high performance too early? Age groups? Do you think winning becomes less significant to them if they've done it a lot of times early?
It's a really good question, Marshall. A personal view, but evidence is hard to come by that's good, is that I think it's a big danger for us. Cycling has an interesting thing where we send our athletes to the World Junior Championships, which is under 19s, and in the last few years we've had a number of athletes who've gone and been successful at under 19s on a world stage, but after that they then transition to the seniors, and it's a big jump. Some can do it because they are very good, but in reality we've also seen a number of athletes just drop out of the system at that point. So I think it is certainly a risk. The British, for instance, who are also very strong in cycling, they don't go to the World Junior Championships. It was great for us, we clean up.
The Americans don't, in swimming, the Americans don't have junior championship, junior national championship, they have the college system.
Yeah.
And yet we do, we try to find out who the country's best 13-year-olds.
Yeah, I think it's something we have to manage. If I think about where we're at the moment, Wace has a young cyclist who's going to the World Juniors, and she is an exceptionally good 17-year-old cyclist. And in reality, she could be at the 2018 Commonwealth Games on the Gold Coast when she's 19. My fear is that going to the World Juniors will actually get her focused there instead of representing Australia in an open age group. So the role model I keep putting in front of her is Laura Trott. Laura is a British rider, won dual Olympic gold at the age of 21 in London. Age of 20. 21 would be their Wace athlete. But to do that, she didn't get swept up in anything junior. She just set the sights on the real goal and went for it, and is pretty good at it. So the question around, does the competition, a lot of competition, it's a concern that I would have. Good coaching, good conversations about long-term things, and treating the competitions as practice. This is a practice competition for here. Even a national championships, it's a practice to see how well you can travel away from home, manage the demands of competition, those kind of things. But actually, I'm not bothered about the result. It's about what's coming up in a number of years' time. Those kind of things might help to mitigate. The other thing I'd say is important is good breaks. Like if you look at things like the AFL, AFL has a mandated 8-week break for athletes, I think. Anybody from AFL? Cricket has mandated amounts of leave for Australian cricketers. It doesn't matter where you go at professional level, where there's a union, there's a mandated big break, and I'm not sure we do that well with our talented youth athletes. They might have a week off, and then they're back. And if you add up 3 weeks across a year, okay, you had 3 weeks of break, but that's not the same as 6 weeks of not training and not being in that environment at the end of a long season. I think that kind of thing could be quite beneficial as well. And I'm looking at a swimming coach. No, and I'm looking at a swimming coach looking at me, sorry, I don't understand. There'd be a lot of people in this room, although there's quite a lot of young people in the room as well, who will have grown up playing, they had a summer sport and they had a winter sport and there wasn't too much overlap. And you didn't really think too much about the other sport while you were in the other season. And you actually got a big gap. So when the season came around again, actually you had some real enthusiasm to pick up the football again and, oh, this is cool, I remember this kind of thing. It was great. And that break is, I think, for junior athletes, that break is important. There's also the research around late and early specialisation sports that says, actually, you don't need to specialise into your main sport until much later, till 16, till 17 even potentially. You have to be playing it, but you don't have to be excluding all your other sports until quite late. So I would be encouraging people to do other things. I have a diver who I work with, and 12 months ago when I first saw her, she was talking around type things of burnout, and we talked about other interests. She now goes for a dance class once a week. Wednesday night after training, she goes and contemporary dance. But she's still doing it 12 months later, and she's loving it. And it doesn't detract from her diving at all, but it keeps her engaged, it keeps her broad, it allows some other things to happen.
So the discussion about the age of athletes brings up this question. For coaches, at what age should you start your mental skills training program with athletes?
Young. Who asked? Do we want to own up to it? Okay.
So what age are people, are there athletes?
So I don't necessarily subscribe to here's the imagery session, here's the relaxation session, I would ask those questions from whenever. I would be asking the questions about what kind of person do you want to be, what type of athlete do you want to be. However, I'm trying to think whether I've asked either of our kids who are 8 and 6. I'm sure I've asked my 8-year-old questions in that space. What's important? What's important? I probably asked it more around her spelling and her homework, but those type of questions, absolutely. What do you notice? She's when I leave here, we're going to take her to a tree, and 2 days ago she was climbing the tree at a certain height, and you could see she was a bit iffy about hanging out of the tree and dropping down for me to catch her. Apparently yesterday, while I was doing something else, she went back to the tree, got higher, but got freaked out. So when we leave here, we're taking her back to the tree, sending her up to the high branch again, and I'll be trying to work out if she can manage her emotions to drop out of the tree, which, if I've understood it correctly, is going to rely a lot on me catching her at the bottom. So I can understand why she's nervous. But if she wants to have the fun, of being that high up in the tree and dropping out of it, she's got to wear the nervousness. So I'll be using those questions with my 8-year-old. So will I sit down with her and teach her imagery? No. Will I encourage her to be mindful and notice things? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Parents get into this equation because I do have a particular incident with parents putting pressure on the health situation. We are
Yeah.
That makes sense. You're
Yes.
things. Yeah.
Yes. This is a very difficult area to work in. Because parents are a necessary part of the journey. I'm trying to think whether they create most of the problems I have with athletes or not. And they don't create most, but there's a number of athletes I would have who the bigger challenge is around parents. I've got a coach who works in a fairly good way in terms of encouraging things, but then a parent who is undermining a lot of that work in the way that they do things. Yet my relationship and my contract is with an athlete or with a coach and athlete, but the parents are that little bit further away and are a little bit harder to influence perhaps.
As a coach, can you do anything to assist that or assist the athlete?
Yeah. So there's an element that is a difficult conversation with the parent to explain. Yeah, to explain what you're trying to achieve and where what they're doing is not enhancing that. There is another part if that doesn't make any action, is to in some ways insulate the athlete in the sense of, all right, that's outside, this is inside, and when you're with me, this is the way we do things. That won't solve anything outside though. That might get them to understand what you want them to do, but if the outside is terrible, you're a bit stuck because while you can bring them in at the start, you send them back out at the end, and that's when they go to the car ride home and the analysis and whatever else it is.
For our competitions, we have a 4-hour car ride home.
Yeah.
It can be very demoralising.
And the thing you can do there is preempt it, I suppose, in terms of the athlete, and ask them to just remember that I was the coach and I was happy, or these kind of things, and they'll say all this kind of stuff, they'll talk all this kind of stuff, whatever it is. Just remember that I was happy, that I appreciated this, and those things will happen. There's not much we can do about that, but it's okay. The other part would be helping them to engage or disengage from that, in the sense of remember that parent is probably doing it because they're passionate, because they want the best for their child. It would be unusual for that parent's intent to be bad. It would be unusual to think that parent is doing it because they think it's going to make things worse. They're doing it because they think it's going to make things better, or because they are ignorant to what they're doing. So being able to help the athlete maybe understand where the parent is coming from might help them be able to manage what's coming at them. It's not an easy question to answer in 2 minutes. But you can do things. You're not entirely helpless, but unless the parent changes, you can't eradicate the problem. Sometimes the acknowledgement that what is intended is good can help open the door to be able to get change. So if I went back to the model and I said, all right, the values are actually correct. The values are you want to help your athlete be good, but the actions are not. And maybe part of that is because you're struggling to deal with your own emotions. You're excited, you're frustrated. All right, and how do they play out when it comes to the actions? So.
Yeah, no, that model was a very good model for that.
As I say, there's very few things that I do now that I don't use that model as my basis. It captures human experience for me, and that's one of the things that the old mental skills, here's your relaxation, here's your goal setting, didn't quite do. It seemed very bitty to me. Here's the box of relaxation, go ahead. Whereas that ties your experience together. And then it's just about being able to, okay, well, that's what's going on there. How does that affect this bit over here?